My name is Alyssa, and I am 27 years old. I work at an electronics manufacturing plant assembling circuit boards that power the devices you use every day. 3 years ago, my mother sent a message to our family group chat. Mother's Day dinner for successful kids only, you, factory worker. Disowned. The words burned into my heart like acid. Instead of confronting her, I quietly packed my life into boxes and moved 500 miles away. Before I share how I faced this rejection, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever been judged by family for your career choices. I grew up in a household where academic achievement wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. My mother Barbara was a university professor with a PhD in economics. My father David practiced corporate law at a prestigious firm downtown. My older sister Sarah became a neurologist, while my younger brother James excelled as a software engineer at a major tech company. Then there was me, the middle child, who never quite fit the family mold. From my earliest memories, our home operated like an extension of school. Dinner conversations revolved around academic accomplishments, and report card days were either celebrations or somber affairs. An A-, my mother would say, examining my grades in 4th grade. What happened to the other 5%? Even when I brought home mostly as that single B+ in science was all my mother would discuss. I still remember the parent-teacher conference in 6th grade. My teacher, Mrs. Wilson, praised my creativity and problem-solving skills, mentioning I had natural leadership abilities. Rather than pride, my mother's face showed only disappointment. But her math scores are inconsistent, she interrupted. What can we do about that? On the drive home, she lectured me about applying myself while I silently watched raindrops race down the car window, wishing I could escape as easily. Sarah and James thrived under this pressure. Sarah memorized biology textbooks for fun, while James built his first computer at age 12. I was different. My intelligence wasn't measured in test scores or academic papers. My hands understood things my brain struggled to articulate. I could take apart and reassemble our toaster by age 10. I fixed our family vacuum when the repair shop quoted a price too steep. I built a treehouse in our backyard that stood for years until a storm finally claimed it. The only person who appreciated these skills was my grandfather Frank, my father's father. He had worked as a mechanic his entire life, retiring from his own small auto repair shop. When I visited his garage, he would show me how engines worked, explaining the poetry of pistons and timing belts. "You've got the touch, Alyssa," he would say, watching me intuitively understand mechanical systems. "Some people read books, you read machines." Grandfather Frank's garage became my sanctuary, especially after difficult days at school or arguments at home. He taught me to respect tools, to be patient with stubborn bolts, and to take pride in fixing what others would discard. "Making something work again," he would say, wiping grease from his weathered hands. "That's a special kind of magic." At home, my mother measured success in degrees and dollar signs. She displayed Sarah's medical school acceptance letter in a frame on the mantel. James's coding competition trophies lined the hallway shelves. My small victories fixing the neighbor's bike or rebuilding a computer went unnoticed, or were dismissed as tinkering. The family parties were the worst. Twice a year, my mother would host elaborate dinners for her colleagues and fellow academics. She would proudly introduce Sarah, my daughter, the neurologist, graduated summa cum laude from Johns Hopkins. Then James, my brilliant son, headed to MIT for his master's in computer science. When guests turned to me, my mother would quickly change the subject or vaguely mention I was still finding my path. I became expert at disappearing into the kitchen to refill drinks or check on dessert, anything to avoid the awkward silence that followed questions about my future. My father, though kinder in his approach, reinforced the same values. "Your mother wants what's best for you," he would say after particularly difficult arguments. "Education is the key to security." He meant well, but his quiet compliance with my mother's expectations only solidified the message my natural abilities weren't valuable in this family. By high school, I had learned to navigate this terrain by becoming nearly invisible. I maintained decent grades, good enough to avoid confrontation, but not outstanding enough to draw attention. I joined clubs that kept me busy after school, giving me legitimate reasons to spend less time at home. I became the stage manager for school plays, handling the practical aspects of production that others found tedious, but that I found satisfying. At night, I would sometimes hear my parents discussing my future, their voices carrying through the heating vents. "I just don't understand her," my mother would say. "She's smart enough, she just doesn't apply herself." My father's responses were always shorter, more measured. "She'll find her way," he would say. She's still young. But even in his defense, I heard the unspoken agreement that whatever path I was on wasn't the right one. Senior year of high school arrived with mounting pressure about college applications. My mother had spreadsheets comparing top business schools, convinced that with the right connections and her academic reputation, I could secure a spot at an Ivy League institution. My protest that I wasn't interested in business fell on deaf ears. "You need to think about your future, Alyssa," she would say. "Do you want to end up working some dead-end job without prospects?" The irony that she was describing my grandfather's career, a man who owned his business and sent his son to law school, escaped her completely. I applied to the schools on her list, writing essays about business innovation and leadership that felt hollow and false. When the acceptance letters came, including one from my mother's alma mater, the decision was essentially made for me. I watched myself pack for college with a strange detachment, as if observing someone else's life unfold. The business program was prestigious, competitive, and utterly miserable for me. While other students debated market strategies and investment portfolios, I found myself sketching mechanical designs in my notebook margins. I fulfilled assignments with technical precision, but no passion. My grades were acceptable, but not exceptional, much like my high school performance. During my sophomore year, a required career counselling session changed everything. The counsellor, Jessica Thompson, was different from the other professors. She had worked in industry before academia and recognised something in my reluctance. "Tell me about what you enjoy doing," she said, setting aside my transcript after a brief glance. "Not what you're studying. What makes you lose track of time?" The question caught me off guard. No one had asked me that before. I hesitated, then described helping my grandfather in his garage, the satisfaction of diagnosing mechanical problems, the joy of making things work. Jessica listened without interruption, then pushed a different set of brochures across her desk. "Have you ever considered engineering or technical programs? There are excellent careers for people who understand systems and can work with their hands." For the first time, someone in academia was validating my natural abilities rather than trying to reshape them. Jessica helped me explore options I had never considered, including specialized technical training programs. She showed me statistics about job satisfaction, career longevity, and even salary potential that challenged my mother's narrow definition of success. That summer, I took an internship at a manufacturing company, expecting to work in their business office. When a staff shortage led to my temporary reassignment to the production floor, I discovered a world that made sense to me. The precise movements of the assembly line, the problem-solving required when systems failed, the tangible results of the day's work, all of it resonated with something deep inside me. I returned to college for my junior year in the midst of an identity crisis. The path ahead felt increasingly wrong, like wearing shoes that pinched with every step. Meanwhile, my grandfather Frank was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. His condition deteriorated rapidly, and I spent weekends traveling home to sit with him in the hospital. During one of my visits, he took my hand, his grip weaker than I remembered, but still steady. "I've watched you grow up fighting against your nature," he said. "Don't waste your life trying to be someone else. Be the best Alyssa you can be." He died the following week. At the funeral, as family members shared stories about his life, I realized how respected he had been in the community. People spoke about his integrity, his skill, his willingness to help others. No one mentioned his lack of a college degree or that he worked with his hands for a living. They talked about a life well lived defined by character rather than credentials. 2 weeks later, I walked into the dean's office and withdrew from the business program. With Jessica's help, I applied to a specialized technical program in electronics manufacturing and quality control. The program would take 18 months and lead to certification that was highly valued in the industry. When I called home to explain my decision, the silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the connection had broken. Then my mother's voice, cold and controlled, "So you're dropping out to become what, a factory worker, after all we've invested in your education?" No explanation about the program's reputation, the skills I would learn, or the career opportunities afterward made any difference. In my mother's mind, I was throwing away my potential to work on an assembly line. My father called separately later that night. "Your mother is upset." He said, his lawyer's neutrality in full effect. "Maybe you should take some time to reconsider." He wasn't forbidding my choice, but neither was he supporting it. He was doing what he had always done, trying to keep peace in the family by steering me toward my mother's vision. Sarah called too, her voice hushed as if she were hiding in a hospital closet between rounds. "Mom's telling everyone you're taking a temporary break," she said. "Just prepare yourself for Thanksgiving, okay?" James sent a text. Whatever makes you happy, sis. Just don't expect mum to understand. Despite the family pressure, I completed the technical program with perfect scores. My instructors noted my unusual combination of mechanical intuition and attention to detail. By graduation, I had 3 job offers. I accepted a position at Electrotech Industries, a major manufacturer of specialized electronic components for medical devices and aerospace systems. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. My position at Electrotech wasn't glamorous by my family's standards. I worked on a specialized assembly line, constructing and testing circuit boards that would eventually find homes in pacemakers, insulin pumps, and aircraft navigation systems. The work required precision focus and an understanding of complex systems, all things that came naturally to me. The factory floor was bright and clean, nothing like the dark, dingy image my mother conjured when she told relatives I was working in manufacturing. My workspace contained advanced equipment microscopes and testing apparatus that required significant training to operate. The atmosphere was professional but friendly, with a diverse group of colleagues who took pride in their work. My supervisor, Thomas Reeves, quickly recognized my aptitude for troubleshooting. Most new hires take months to spot patterns in circuit failures, he said during my first performance review. You seem to have an intuitive understanding of how these systems should function. Within 6 months, I was training other team members on quality control procedures I had helped refine. Unlike the competitive atmosphere of college, my co-workers operated as a team. We celebrated birthdays with break room cupcakes, covered for each other during family emergencies, and socialized outside of work. Mariana from testing invited me to her daughter's quinceañera. Doug from calibration included me in weekly trivia nights at a local bar. For the first time, I felt part of a community that valued contributions over credentials. This sense of belonging made the ongoing situation with my family even more painful by contrast. I still tried to attend family gatherings, driving the 3 hours home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Each visit became an exercise in endurance. The first Christmas after starting my job, my aunt asked what I was doing these days. Before I could answer, my mother interjected, Alyssa is working in manufacturing while figuring out her next steps. The dismissive tone and the implication that my career was temporary hung in the air. Later, when we were alone in the kitchen, my aunt approached me. Your grandfather Frank would be proud, she said quietly. He always said you had his gift for making things. It was a small moment of validation that I clung to during the remainder of the uncomfortable holiday. My mother refused to visit my new apartment, though I had carefully saved for a place in a safe neighborhood with a small garden patio. I don't need to see where you're living right now, she said during one phone call. Call me when you're ready to move forward with your life. The message was clear. My current life wasn't worth acknowledging. Even Sarah and James began pulling away. Sarah, busy with her medical residency, rarely returned my calls. James, who once shared memes and gaming stories with me daily, now sent only occasional generic texts. I suspected my mother had made it clear that supporting my choices would put them at odds with her. Each night, I would return to my apartment, a space that reflected my personality more than my childhood bedroom ever had, and try to reconcile the fulfillment I felt at work with the emptiness of losing my family's approval. Sometimes I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I had made the wrong choice. Other nights, I would remember my grandfather's words and feel a quiet certainty that I was finally living authentically. After a particularly difficult phone conversation with my mother, where she suggested I use my employee discount to buy her a new tablet, since that's the kind of thing you make now, I started seeing a therapist. Dr. Patrice Martinez specialized in family dynamics and helped me understand the concept of conditional love. Your mother has created a transactional relationship, Dr. Martinez explained. Her approval and affection are contingent on you fulfilling her vision of success. That's not how healthy family relationships function. Over several months, Dr. Martinez helped me establish boundaries and manage my expectations. I stopped initiating calls to my mother, waiting instead for her to reach out. I declined invitations to family events where I knew I would be belittled. I focused on building relationships with people who accepted me as I was. At work, I continued to thrive. When a critical production issue threatened to delay a shipment of components for a new pacemaker design, I worked through the weekend to identify and resolve the problem. The client specifically requested that I oversee quality control for their future orders. My salary increased and I was given additional responsibilities supervising new employees. None of these achievements registered with my mother as success. When I mentioned my raise during a rare phone call, She changed the subject to Sarah's new research publication. When I shared that I had been asked to help develop training materials for the company's overseas expansion, she responded with a story about James being recruited by a competitor. The disparity between my professional growth and my family's perception created a cognitive dissonance that became increasingly difficult to bear. I kept a journal recording both my accomplishments at work and the dismissive responses from my family. Seeing the pattern in black and white helped me recognize that the problem wasn't my choices. It was their inability to value anything outside their narrow definition of success. Still, a part of me held on to hope that they would eventually see the value in my work, especially as I gained more responsibility and recognition within my field. I sent holiday cards, birthday gifts, and occasional updates, maintaining the thinnest thread of connection while protecting myself from the worst of their judgment. Then came the text message that severed even that fragile connection. The week before Mother's Day, I was in a good place professionally. I had just completed a specialized certification in advanced electronics testing, which came with a modest bonus and new responsibilities. I had been with Electrotech for almost 2 years and had built a reputation as a reliable problem solver. For the first time in months, I felt confident enough to share my accomplishments with my family. That Friday, I sent a message to our family group chat, a thread that had been mostly silent except for my mother's occasional updates about Sarah and James. I wrote about my certification, attaching a photo of the framed certificate my team had surprised me with, decorated with signatures and congratulatory notes. No one responded immediately, which wasn't unusual. Sarah was often in surgery, James travelled frequently for work, and my father rarely participated in group messages. I set my phone aside and joined my co-workers for our traditional Friday lunch at the diner across from the factory. It was during dessert, a slice of apple pie I was sharing with Mariana, that my phone buzzed repeatedly. I glanced down to see a series of messages in the family chat. The first was from my mother, planning Mother's Day dinner next Sunday, 5 p.m, for successful kids only. Before I could process this, another message appeared. Sarah, James, please confirm you can attend. Your accomplishments make me proud to be your mother. Then the final blow. Alyssa factory worker. Disowned. Don't bother responding. The diner noise faded to a distant hum. I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the words, unable to believe what I was seeing. Mariana noticed my expression and asked if everything was okay. I somehow managed to excuse myself and make it to the bathroom before the tears came. Locked in a stall, I watched more messages appear. Sarah. Mum, that's not fair. I'll call you. James didn't respond in the group, but sent me a private message. She's being dramatic. You know how she gets about Mother's Day. My father called twice, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. That evening, alone in my apartment, I scrolled through years of messages, photos, and emails from my family. I saw the pattern with painful clarity, the consistent devaluation of my choices, the subtle and not so subtle ways they had communicated that my path wasn't worthy of respect. Mother's Day dinner was just the final explicit statement of what had been implied for years. Sarah called around midnight. Mum was out of line, she said, her voice tired. But you know how important appearances are to her. Maybe if you enrolled in night classes or something, just so she could tell her friends you're working toward a degree, why should I have to change my entire life to make Mum comfortable at her dinner parties, I asked. The silence that followed was answer enough. Sarah, for all her medical knowledge, didn't have a prescription for our family's dysfunction. I spent the weekend in a fog alternating between rage, grief, and a strange sense of clarity. By Sunday night, I had made a decision. I wouldn't engage in the drama. I wouldn't call my mother to argue or defend my choices. I wouldn't beg for inclusion or compromise my identity to regain approval. Instead, I would leave. Not just the conversation, the entire situation. Monday morning, I requested a meeting with Thomas, my supervisor. Electrotech had facilities across the country, including a newer plant that specialized in aerospace components nearly 500 miles away. I'd like to apply for a transfer, I said, surprised at the steadiness in my voice. I'm ready for a fresh challenge. Thomas seemed confused but supportive. You're one of our best QC specialists, he said. We'd hate to lose you here, but I can make some calls if you're sure about this. Within days, the transfer was approved. The new position came with a small raise and housing assistance for the relocation. I gave notice on my apartment, sold furniture I couldn't take, and packed the rest into a rented trailer. I told only my closest co-workers where I was going, swearing them to secrecy. I didn't tell my family I was leaving. Not my mother, who had made her position clear. Not my father, who had never stood up for me. Not Sarah or James, who meant well, but ultimately enabled the dynamic. I simply disappeared from their lives as thoroughly as I had been erased from Mother's Day dinner. The night before my departure, I stood in my empty apartment. The blank walls and bare floors echoed with memories of the life I had built here. My first real home as an adult, the place where I had begun to discover who I truly was, apart from my family's expectations. I ran my hand along the kitchen counter where I had prepared countless meals, looked out the window at the small garden patio, where I had nurtured herbs and flowers, checked the bedroom closet one last time for forgotten items. As I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the entryway mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me, stronger, more determined than the uncertain girl who had moved in 2 years earlier. "You can do this," I whispered to my reflection. The words echoed in the empty space, a promise and a farewell. I locked the door behind me, dropped the keys in the management office's nightbox, and drove away without looking back. My new city greeted me with unfamiliar streets and the particular loneliness of being a stranger. The company had arranged temporary housing, a furnished apartment near the facility, while I looked for a permanent place. That first night, I sat on a borrowed couch, eating takeout Chinese food, questioning every decision that had led me here. Had I overreacted? Was I running away rather than facing my problems? Should I have tried one more time to make my mother understand my choices? The questions circled like hungry wolves, threatening to devour my fragile confidence. The next morning, I reported to the Electrotech facility for orientation. The building was newer than my previous workplace, with state-of-the-art equipment and expanded production areas. My new supervisor, Robert Chen, gave me a tour introducing me to team members and explaining the projects currently underway. "Thomas speaks very highly of you," Robert said, as we walked the production floor. "We're developing components for the next generation of commercial spacecraft. Your experience with precision testing is exactly what we need." The work was challenging and engaging from the first day. The aerospace contracts demanded even greater accuracy than the medical devices I was accustomed to working with. Every component underwent rigorous testing under extreme conditions to simulate the stresses of launch and space exposure. My ability to identify potential failure points quickly made me valuable to the team. While work provided purpose during the day, evenings and weekends stretched before me with empty hours. I explored my new city alone, finding favorite coffee shops, bookstores, and parks. I joined a community garden, tending a small plot of vegetables and flowers. I volunteered at the local library, helping with their technology education program for seniors. Slowly, I built a routine that kept loneliness at bay. 2 months after my arrival, a new quality control specialist joined our team. Lisa Ortega had transferred from another industry, bringing fresh perspectives and a warmth that immediately put people at ease. During her first week, we discovered we lived in the same apartment complex. By the end of the month, we were carpooling to work and sharing meals several times a week. Lisa became the friend I hadn't realized I desperately needed. She listened without judgment as I gradually shared pieces of my family's story. My parents immigrated from Mexico when I was 3, she told me one evening over homemade enchiladas. They worked multiple jobs to give me opportunities they never had. When I chose manufacturing over the business degree they wanted for me, they were disappointed. But they eventually came to see that I was happy and successful in my own way. "How did you get them to understand?" I asked, hungry for the secret formula that might someday heal my own family divide. "Time," she said simply. And proving through actions, not arguments, that my path was right for me. Also, she added with a smile, bringing home friends for my mother to feed. She may not have understood my job, but she understood that I had found my people. Inspired by Lisa's experience, I threw myself into developing my skills even further. I enrolled in specialized courses on aerospace manufacturing standards and circuit design. I volunteered for the most challenging projects and stayed late to master new testing protocols. Robert noticed my dedication and began assigning me to train new team members. 18 months after joining the facility, an opportunity arose that changed the trajectory of my career. A persistent issue with a particular sensor component had been causing costly delays. During a team troubleshooting session, I suggested a modification to both the testing process and the component design itself. "It's counterintuitive," I explained, sketching my idea on the whiteboard. "But if we adjust the connection point here and change the testing sequence, I think we'll catch the failures earlier and possibly prevent them altogether." Robert gave me the green light to develop a prototype. Working closely with the design engineers, I refined the concept into a practical solution. When testing confirmed a 98% reduction in failures, the company implemented the change across all similar components. The improvement saved Electrotech millions in production costs and secured our position as the preferred supplier for that spacecraft system. At the quarterly meeting, the division director personally recognized my contribution. The next week, I was promoted to quality control supervisor with a substantial salary increase and a team of 5 reporting directly to me. With my new financial stability, I purchased a small house, nothing fancy but entirely mine. It had a detached garage I converted into a workshop installing tools similar to those my grandfather had used. Weekends found me restoring vintage electronics or helping neighbors repair appliances others would have discarded. The skills my grandfather had nurtured became not just my profession, but my connection to his memory. As my professional life flourished, I began teaching free weekend workshops for local high school students interested in electronics and manufacturing careers. Many came from backgrounds where college wasn't financially feasible, and I wanted them to understand the dignity and opportunities available in skilled trades. The local newspaper ran a feature about the program, including a photo of me surrounded by students disassembling old computers. The article highlighted my career path and quoted me discussing the value of hands-on work. These students are learning skills our society desperately needs. Not everyone thrives in traditional academic settings, but that doesn't limit their potential for success and contribution. I sent copies of the article to Mariana and my other friends from my previous location, but didn't share it with my family. Though I occasionally wondered about them, I had stopped checking social media for updates. The pain had dulled to a manageable ache flaring only on birthdays and holidays, times when family connections are most acutely missed. Through Lisa, I had developed a circle of friends who became my chosen family. We celebrated holidays together, helped each other through illnesses and breakups, shared promotions and setbacks. They knew me for who I was, not who someone else wanted me to be. 3 years passed in this new life. I had not only survived being cast out, I had thrived. The wound of rejection had scarred over still visible, but no longer raw. I had proven at least to myself that success could be measured in ways my mother had never considered in work that matters, relationships built on acceptance, and a life aligned with authentic values. Then on an ordinary Tuesday morning, my phone displayed a name I had not seen in years, Dad. I stared at my father's name on the phone screen, my thumb hovering over the answer button. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, preserving the careful equilibrium I had established in my life without them. But curiosity, or perhaps some lingering hope for reconciliation, made me answer. Alyssa. My father's voice sounded older, more fragile than I remembered. Thank you for picking up. I wasn't sure you would. What's wrong? I asked, hearing the tension in his tone. In our family, unexpected calls usually meant bad news. He hesitated before responding. Your mother is in the hospital. They found a mass on her pancreas last week. The biopsy results came back yesterday. It's cancer. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Despite everything, I felt a rush of concern. How advanced? Stage 3. They're starting aggressive treatment, but... He left the sentence unfinished, the prognosis clear in his silence. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, unsure what else to offer. How are you holding up? Managing. A lawyer's answer, precise and revealing nothing. Then more honestly, not well, actually. Sarah's handling the medical coordination, but she's overwhelmed with her own practice. James is flying in from Seattle next week. A pause. Your mother has been asking about you. The implication hung in the air between us. I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted. Dad, I don't know if... I'm not asking you to come, he interrupted. I understand why you might not want to. I just thought you should know. After we disconnected, I sat motionless at my kitchen table. Outside, spring was arriving in my garden, the perennials I had planted pushing through soil towards sunlight. Inside, I felt frozen in an emotional winter. That evening, Lisa came over with pizza and wine, listening as I processed the news. What are you thinking? She asked after I had related the conversation. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel, I admitted. Part of me wants to book a flight immediately. Another part remembers that text message and wonders if this is just another opportunity to be hurt. Lisa refilled our glasses. You don't have to decide tonight, but whatever you choose, do it for yourself, not for your mother's approval or anyone else's expectations. Over the next few days, I found myself distracted at work, mentally replaying years of family dynamics, remembering both wounds and rare moments of connection. I called Dr. Martinez, my former therapist, for guidance. Going back doesn't mean you're forgiving or forgetting, she advised. It might be about giving yourself closure, whatever that looks like for you. A week after my father's call, I requested personal leave from work. Robert approved it immediately, adding, "Take whatever time you need. We've got things covered here." I packed lightly a small suitcase with clothes for 5 days, though I wasn't sure I would stay that long. The night before my flight, I stood in my grandfather's workshop running my fingers over his old tools that now hung on my walls. "I wish you were here to tell me if I'm doing the right thing," I whispered to his memory. The flight and subsequent drive from the airport felt surreal, like traveling backward in time. The landmarks of my hometown appeared both familiar and strange, as if I was seeing them through two lenses simultaneously, the person I had been when I left and the person I had become since. At the hospital, I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, gathering courage. Finally, I texted Sarah, "I'm here." "Which floor?" Her reply came instantly, followed by a stream of messages expressing surprise and relief. James met me at the elevator, his familiar face now sporting a beard and tiny lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago. "Holy shit," he said, pulling me into an awkward hug. "You actually came." "I'm still deciding if that was smart," I replied honestly. Sarah waited at the nurse's station, her professional doctor's coat contrasting with her exhausted expression. She embraced me tightly, whispering, "Thank you, I've missed you so much." The siblings I had once been so close to now felt like acquaintances, familiar but distant. We made small talk in the hallway, carefully avoiding mention of the years of silence between us. Sarah explained our mother's treatment plan with clinical detachment, while James fidgeted with his phone, clearly uncomfortable. "Dad's getting coffee," Sarah finally said. "Mom's awake if you want to see her." "Okay," I nodded, steeling myself. "Does she know I'm coming?" "We didn't tell her," James admitted. "Just in case you changed your mind." The hospital room was dimly lit, monitors beeping softly. My mother looked diminished in the adjustable bed, her normally perfect hair, limp, her face pale without makeup. For a moment I saw past the person who had rejected me to the human being facing her mortality, and my rehearsed composure wavered. Her eyes widened when she saw me in the doorway. "Alyssa?" Her voice was raspy, either from emotion or treatment side effects. "You're here." I moved closer to the bed. "I'm here." An awkward silence stretched between us, 3 years of unspoken words, creating an invisible barrier. Finally, she reached for a folder on her bedside table. "The nurses printed this for me," she said, opening it to reveal the newspaper article about my teaching program. "And this," another printout, a company newsletter announcing my promotion. "And this," a technical journal featuring an article about the component modification I had developed. I stared at the collection, confused. "You've been following my career." She nodded weakly. "Your father found you first, about a year after you left. He saw a post from one of your co-workers, Mariana, tagging you at some work event. We didn't reach out because..." She trailed off, then continued. "Because we thought you wouldn't want to hear from us, from me. You said I was disowned." I reminded her, the pain still fresh despite the years. "I know." She closed her eyes briefly. "I was wrong. So terribly wrong. Not just about that text, about everything. About what success looks like. About what matters." Before I could respond, my father appeared in the doorway, coffee cups in hand. He stopped when he saw us, surprise and relief washing over his face. "Alyssa, you're really here." That evening, after my mother had fallen asleep from her medication, my father walked me to my rental car. The hospital parking lot was quiet, the spring air cool against my skin. "I should have stood up for you," he said abruptly. "All those years, but especially after that text. I should have told your mother she was wrong. Why didn't you?" I asked the question that had haunted me for years. He looked away, shame evident in his posture. "The same reason I became a corporate lawyer instead of an environmental attorney like I wanted. The same reason I stayed silent at 1,000 dinner parties when your mother dismissed your grandfather's work." He met my eyes. Fear of disrupting the narrative, fear of conflict, fear of losing what I thought I needed. And now I realize what I actually lost. He pulled out his phone, showing me a folder of bookmarked articles and social media screenshots, all related to my life and work over the past 3 years. "I've followed everything you've done. I've been so proud of you, Alyssa. Too cowardly to tell you, but so incredibly proud." Back at the hotel, I called Lisa to update her. They've been keeping tabs on me, I told her, still processing this revelation. My mother has a folder of everything I've accomplished. Does that change how you feel about what happened? Lisa asked. I don't know, I answered honestly. It's like discovering the people who rejected you were secretly admiring you from afar. It's validating and infuriating at the same time. The next day, Sarah invited me to coffee in the hospital cafeteria. Away from our parents, she dropped the polished doctor facade. I've wanted to call you so many times, she confessed. After you left, things changed. Mom became obsessed with tracking your career. She would show me articles about you and ask if what you were doing was important in your field, trying to understand. Why didn't you reach out? I asked. Sarah stared into her coffee. At first, I thought you needed space. Then as time passed, it felt like the gap was too wide to bridge. She looked up, her expression pained. And truthfully, I was jealous. Jealous of what? Of your courage. You did what I never could, chose your own path regardless of Mom's approval. She twisted her wedding ring nervously. Do you know why I became a neurologist? Because Mum once mentioned it was the most prestigious specialty, not because I loved it. I don't even particularly enjoy it most days. This confession stunned me. Sarah had always seemed so certain, so perfectly aligned with our mother's values. James shared a similar story over dinner that night, admitting he had developed anxiety and insomnia, trying to maintain his successful son image. After you left, it got worse. All the pressure focused on us. I started having panic attacks before family gatherings, knowing I'd be paraded around as the tech wonder kid. These conversations shifted something fundamental in my understanding of our family. My siblings hadn't been the favoured ones, thriving under our mother's expectations. They had been prisoners of them, lacking only my catalyst for escape. By the third day of my visit, my mother was strong enough for longer conversations. During a moment when we were alone, she asked about my house and my workshop. I showed her photos on my phone, including ones of projects I had completed. You built that bookshelf, she asked, studying the image. It's beautiful. Your grandfather would be so proud. The mention of him from her lips without dismissal or criticism felt like a small miracle. I think about him every time I'm in the workshop, I admitted. Frank was a good man, she said quietly. I never understood his work or yours. I was so fixated on degrees and titles that I missed the artistry in what you both do. She handed back my phone. I've had a lot of time to think in this hospital bed, about what matters, about the damage I've done. It wasn't a direct apology, but from my mother, this acknowledgement represented a seismic shift. We were far from healing the wounds between us, but for the first time, I believed she could see me, really see me for who I was. Before I left to return home, we had a family dinner in my mother's hospital room. Sarah, James, my father and me gathered around her bed with takeout containers balanced on our laps. The conversation was cautious but genuine, navigating the delicate balance between acknowledging our painful history and finding new ground to stand on together. As I prepared to leave, my mother took my hand. Will you come back? She asked, vulnerability evident in her question. I will. I promised, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. This isn't the end of the conversation, just a beginning. My mother's treatments continued for 6 months, a grueling regimen of chemotherapy followed by radiation. I flew back every few weeks, balancing work responsibilities with this unexpected family reconnection. Each visit built small bridges over the chasm that had separated us for years. During her 3rd month of treatment, when she was between chemo cycles and feeling stronger, I invited my parents to visit me. I want you to see my life, I told them on a video call, something that had become our Sunday routine. My home, my work, my community. My father agreed immediately. My mother hesitated, then nodded. I'd like that very much. They arrived on a Friday afternoon in early fall. I had taken the day off to prepare cleaning my already tidy house and harvesting vegetables from my garden for dinner. I felt strangely nervous, as if I were bringing home a report card rather than hosting my parents in the life I had built. My father embraced me warmly when they arrived. My mother, thinner from treatment but with colour returning to her cheeks, stood awkwardly on my front porch until I stepped forward to hug her. She held on longer than I expected, her frame fragile under my arms. Your home is lovely, she said as I gave them a tour. She ran her fingers along the bookshelf I had built, examining the joinery with new appreciation. In my kitchen, she noticed the herbs growing in pots along the windowsill. You always had a green thumb, even as a child. Remember that bean plant science project in 3rd grade? Yours grew twice as tall as anyone else's. I was startled that she remembered this small triumph from my childhood, something I had forgotten myself. Perhaps she had noticed more than I realized even then. The workshop in the garage elicited the strongest reaction from both parents. My father recognized some of his own father's tools hanging on the wall. "Dad would love seeing these being used again," he said, voice thick with emotion. My mother moved slowly around the space, taking in the workbench I had built, the organized tools, the current projects in various stages of completion. "I never understood this world," she admitted. "I dismissed it because it wasn't familiar to me." She picked up a circuit board I was modifying for a neighbor's antique radio. I was wrong to do that. The next day, I gave them a tour of the Electrotech facility. Robert had arranged special clearance, allowing us to view the production areas and testing labs where I spent my days. My father asked intelligent questions about the manufacturing process. My mother remained quieter but attentive, watching as team members greeted me with obvious respect. In the conference room afterward, Robert presented an overview of the component modification I had designed, including charts showing the financial impact and subsequent contracts it had secured. "Your daughter has become one of our most valuable innovations leaders," he told my parents. "We're fortunate to have her." My mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Later she explained, "I always wanted you to be exceptional. I just had such a narrow view of what that could look like." That evening, I invited Lisa and some friends over for a barbecue in my backyard. As I watched my mother engage in conversation with people who knew me, as I was now not as the middle child struggling to meet impossible expectations, I saw her piecing together a new understanding of who I had become. After my parents returned home, our communication continued to evolve. My mother sent me an email with links to articles about skilled manufacturing and its crucial role in the economy. "I'm educating myself," she wrote. "I should have done this years ago." When her final scan showed no evidence of disease, we celebrated with a family video call. For the first time in my memory, she spoke about each of her children with equal pride, acknowledging our different paths without ranking them against each other. 6 months later, Electrotech promoted me to Director of Product Development, overseeing innovation across multiple product lines. When I shared the news, my mother asked thoughtful questions about my responsibilities and team. The conversation felt surreal, my achievements in manufacturing being treated with the same respect once reserved for academic accolades. My teaching program for local students expanded with corporate sponsorship, allowing us to offer small scholarships for technical training. A feature in a national magazine highlighted our work, including interviews with students who had found career paths they might otherwise never have discovered. When the magazine arrived in the mail, I found a note from my mother tucked inside. "I've ordered a subscription. I want to understand your world better." As Mother's Day approached the 4th anniversary of the text message that had changed everything, I felt a familiar anxiety. Despite our progress, the day carried emotional weight. I sent flowers early in the week with a simple note, "Thinking of you." 2 days before Mother's Day, my phone rang with my mother's number. "I'd like to host dinner this Sunday," she said without preamble. "For all my children." I hesitated, the old wound pulsing. "All of your children." "Yes, Alyssa, you, Sarah and James, if you're willing to come." Something in her voice, a vulnerability rarely exposed, made my decision. "I'll be there." The family home looked the same, yet different, like a familiar photograph seen from a new angle. In the dining room, my mother had made a subtle but significant change alongside Sarah's medical school diploma. And James's technology awards, she had framed the magazine feature about my teaching program and a certificate of innovation from Electrotech. Before dinner, in a moment when we were alone in the kitchen, my mother turned to me with uncharacteristic directness. "I need to say something I should have said a long time ago," she began. "I was wrong, Alyssa. Wrong to define success so narrowly. Wrong to value credentials over character. Wrong to make my love conditional." She took a deep breath. "I am sorry, truly sorry for the pain I caused you." The apology I had never expected to hear hung in the air between us. "Thank you," I said finally, my voice steady, despite the emotion rising in my throat. "That means a lot." During dinner, my mother raised her glass for a toast. "To my 3 remarkable children, each successful in your own authentic way. I'm grateful that life gave me another chance to appreciate all of you." She turned to me. "And especially grateful to you, Alyssa, for finding your way back to us after I pushed you away." Later. As we shared dessert, Sarah confessed she had begun transitioning to medical research instead of clinical practice. "I realized I enjoy the investigative aspects of medicine more than patient care," she explained. "It took me seeing Alyssa's courage to examine my own choices." James revealed he was considering a sabbatical to explore woodworking, something he had secretly envied in my life. "Maybe you could teach me some basics," he asked. "Yeah." And I found myself nodding, a new connection forming between us. My father, watching these exchanges, caught my eye across the table. His expression conveyed what words could not: recognition of the transformation in our family, gratitude for my return, and regret for the years lost. As I drove back to the airport the next day, I reflected on the winding path that had brought me here. Being cast out had forced me to build a life entirely my own, a painful gift I hadn't asked for but now wouldn't trade. The relationship with my family was healing, not because I had changed to meet their expectations, but because they had expanded their understanding of what made a life valuable. In the workshop of my own making, I had discovered that some broken things can be repaired to become stronger at the mended places. Some designs improve through failure and modification. Some connections once severed can be rewired in new and better configurations. True success isn't measured in degrees hanging on walls or job titles on business cards. It's found in work that engages your mind and heart, relationships built on acceptance rather than expectation, and the courage to live authentically even when that path leads away from everything familiar. Sometimes being cast out is the beginning of finding your way home to yourself. And sometimes, if you're fortunate, those who once rejected you find their way to a new understanding, not of who they wanted you to be, but of who you truly are. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own authentic path? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of finding personal strength through difficult family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my story today, and remember, your worth isn't defined by others' expectations, but by the life you build true to yourself.